Hell yeah. So, following up Sasha, you guys want to know what fucked me up in childhood? Are you curious in the slightest? Yeah. So my biological father, my sperm donor, was a cop. Actually, as far as I'm concerned, he still is a cop. I'm not sure. I haven't spoke with him in 15 some odd years. Bad situation, but this feeds nicely into my presentation because it's partly as a result of him that I became so interested in not only anarchism and freedom, but also in the human brain, in our psychology, what makes us tick, how we learn to try to move forward and get over things, conquer trauma. And I became interested in the concept of money and how money affects us psychologically. So I'm going to start here with a question, and then I'm going to share an anecdote or a story. Who here believes that they had a proper monetary or money-related education growing up? By show of hands. Like no one. And you know what's weird about this? I was doing the same speech, a similar one in Bulgaria, and everybody raised their hand. I was, wow, that's impressive. I didn't get shit for education. You did all right. You did all right. So growing up, I grew up in a small town out in West Texas, and my mother, the only thing that she instilled me with was this idea that I need to try to learn to save money. I need to learn to spend it appropriately and properly, and eventually I need to learn to save money. But that was the extent of my monetary education. I wasn't provided with any idea as to what money actually is, where it comes from, how it's printed, or giving any of the details about what's going on in our monetary world, especially in the fascist United States. None whatsoever. So my goal here today is to try to demonstrate that the psychology of human beings in terms of how we deal with money is on the precipice or the cusp of a major, beautiful, and brilliant transformation. We're right at it. And it really took me an exploration of cryptocurrency and psychology to start trying to get my head around what money is all about. And I think that you guys will be able to jibe with where we're moving in terms of this monetary revolution. So I don't think I can start this presentation out without providing you guys with some idea of what money is so we can make sure that we're all on the same page. Who in their mind has a clear definition or understanding of the nature of money? By show of hands. Couple of people. Okay, that's good. We have a few people who have that. At least they educated themselves to such an extent that you have an understanding of money. So what is it? Money is a medium of exchange. It's how human beings communicate and share value. It's an invention. It's a tool. It's not something that's physical and concrete. Now, one of the things about money is that it has to have certain kinds of features or qualifications or characteristics that make it what it is. Good money is generally scarce, it's portable, it's divisible, it's malleable, and if it can meet these criteria and more, then society and individuals, in this case government, we're going to talk about this, make a determination of what constitutes good money. But before I get deeply into that, I want you guys to go on an exploration with me about the nature of money and where it gets its so-called value. There's some people, and I'm probably going to burst some bubbles here, some people that think the value in money is intrinsic, that it's somehow built into the very essence of the money. This goes for dollars, for gold, for silver, for cryptocurrency. But value by its nature is subjective. If we value something, that is our own personal preference of its valuation. And let me provide a little quote for you. There's an amazing speaker in the cryptocurrency space named Andreas Antonopoulos. And what he said is that value in terms of money, and even in cryptocurrency, is a collective hallucination. What that means is it's really a collective agreement of how we should exchange value in society, of how we should deal with each other in terms of goods and services. And it makes it extremely hassle-free, stress-free, and easy to do. Now, I'm of the mindset, and this occurred to me by thinking about cryptocurrency and this new monetary revolution that we're entering into versus fiat currency and the differences in their properties. But I'm of the mindset that fiat currency has fundamentally warped our psychology. It's changed our thinking to such a degree where people who deal with it on a regular basis don't think in ways that make sense, in ways that embolden people to be more compassionate, more caring, more loving, and more connected with their fellow peers. But cryptocurrency is a new tool that's revolutionizing the way that we're going to think about money and the way that we think about it now. And I believe strongly that there are people who share this experience. So let's talk about fiat money for a second, because I'm going to get into some experimental studies, and I'm not going to try to bore you with these guys. We're going to go through them fairly quickly. But I want you to see, not anecdotally, but observationally, the studies in this current culture, this current milieu that we find ourselves in. I want you to look at what kind of studies have been done on how money affects our psyches on a deep level. So here's the thing with fiat currency. First and foremost, fiat currency is controlled entirely by governments, right? Most of you are all aware of the atrocities and the nastiness committed by agencies like the central banking entities and Federal Reserve of the United States. These people who are involved in this apparatus can literally print a button or press a button and print out as much money as they want. They can type in a few digits in a keyboard and fill their own bank accounts, effectively extorting the population and hyperinflating the currency. So money, fiat currency, is intimately interwoven into this decadent, corrupt, nasty, broken system that affects us all on a psychologically deep level, right? It makes people hate money. Who here believes, and I really doubt that there's many people in this room right now that hate money, but who believes there's a lot of people who hate money? And what do we call these people? Communists. Right? There's people who believe that it's not just the want of money that is evil, but somehow the tool itself is evil. But just like guns, money is just a tool at the end of the day, unless it's wielded for nefarious ends, just like the federal government wields money. And what this does, it creates a master-slave dynamic, right? Imagine if you're the king, if you're the politician, if you're the president, and you get to print all of your symbols on this particular piece of money. If you get to print it out and you get to tell people, leveraging coercion, that you have to use this money or else, do you not think that's going to affect our psyche in a given territorial region if we are forced, basically enslaved, to use that money? And here's one of the key takeaways of this talk. You guys already all know this, but what we have to do is we have to instill people with the notion that there's a new kind of money that's emerging in society. And this new kind of money is changing the way that we think about monetary interactions with each other. It's changing the way that we do business with each other. And I'll tell you some stories about how this is going to continue to do good. So one of the things about money is that the symbolism involved is somewhat sketchy. I am not the expert in symbology and occultism in this room, and I'm sure you guys are going to get plenty of that. But we already know there's some references to various forms of the dark arts, occultism, Freemasonry, etc., that is embedded into the dollar. And I'm not here to get involved in any conspiracies or make any kinds of conjecture. I'm more interested in the what does it do? How does it affect us? Regardless of where it comes from, regardless of the reasoning, we know that rulers created it and made it, especially, and remember I'm talking about fiat currency, we know that it affects people in certain kinds of ways. And that's what I want to explore here with some of the next studies, and then we'll go on why I've come to this conclusion. So a lot of the people, I mentioned communists a minute ago, a lot of the people who really have a problem with money or they have some kind of concerns, there's this term, it's called crimatophobia. Crimatophobia just means a fear of money. Now, it's not an actual psychological diagnosis. You can't go to the psychiatrist and say, hey, this money scares me, and then they're going to hand you a diagnosis. That's not how it works. But a lot of people, I mentioned communists, a lot of people, not just communists though, have an innate uncertainty about money. They have an innate fear. And they think that people who are wealthy or rich are automatically evil. Who can jive with that? You've heard people talk about some people even go as far as to say that if you have a lot of money, you're immoral, right? No reasoning whatsoever as to how they got the money, where it came from. If you have a lot of money, regardless, you're immoral. And here's the key insight to that. Where that came from is the fact that we're embedded in this clusterfuck of a system where these people can print as much money as they want and they get to have first dibs on it, right? So naturally, a lot of people are going to have their suspicions about money, but they're going to word it in a way that's as general as possible. But what's happening here is, in a way, they're not wrong, because the money that everybody is forced to use is highly controlled, highly regimented, and it's made certain that certain people have accessibility to it before everyone else. Luckily, that is changing for the good, and we'll get to that. But let's look at some of the studies and some of the research evidence behind money and why it is the way it is currently. So there's a research study that was done by T. Rowan Price that looked at, and this is going to harken back to my opening story, that suggests that a good percentage of parents will not talk to their children about money. This is 3/4 of parents have no conversation. This is the reason why when I ask that question to you guys, very few people raise their hands. Parents feel uncertain and lost about sharing their ideas about saving money, about what money is, and how to get it or how to acquire it with their children. What the study doesn't suggest is why that is. Why can't parents? All the study suggested was that parents they feel that they lack confidence. And of course they lack confidence. They weren't taught as children how to deal with money, how to handle it, etc. And this is for most of the average person. Of course, there's outliers who they're lucky upon birth. They were brought into a family who cares about these things, and that they want to educate their children about the importance of it. So that's my plea here. We're all libertarian educated. We've decided for whatever reason we wanted to gain more awareness about the world, more care, and more love. So I think it's super important for our revolution, for this notion that we want to break down the current establishment and replace it with more instantations of freedom and love and dignity and decency. We have to teach our children about the importance of money, but really what we're going to be teaching them about is the new money, the transformational money that's coming into existence, the cryptocurrencies. Let's look at some more studies though. So who here has had a problem in their relationships where you got into a financial debate or debacle with your significant other? Yeah, I didn't think that I was alone in this particular issue. So if you've gotten into a debate or an argument with your lover about finances, then you're living in reality, because about roughly 30% of couples who get into an argument about money are more than likely to get a divorce. This is if you're married specifically. And it happens all the time. And of course, if the people involved in this situation grew up not having a monetary education, imagine now they're bickering with each other about money. They have no idea what money is, where it came from, how they acquired it. This is hugely problematic. And it only speaks to the current system and what we're embedded in. Now, this is a study that's a lot more interesting because it speaks to the overarching thesis that I have here. So the money empathy gap was a research study done by Paul Piff at the University of California. And what he did in this study, he pitted two players in a Monopoly game against each other, except one of the players was advantaged, meaning they had an extra dice, they started with more money, and the other player was disadvantaged. When they got into this room, Paul Piff recorded their game. They played a regular game of Monopoly, and at the beginning of it, it started out hunky-dory. They were both laughing and jesting with each other. But as the game went on, the person who was advantaged, and remember the system is rigged, right, from the beginning, the advantaged person started laughing at the other person. They started gesturing aggressively. They started slamming the pieces down on the board as they walked by with the pieces. And they just basically made fun of the person who was losing, even though they clearly had an advantage of the game. It's like they lost that sense. So Piff said that these individuals who were advantaged lost their ability to empathize with the other person. They lost their ability to connect. And now here's the insight or the idea that Piff missed. His crew simply thought that money, as a general overarching idea, is to blame for this problem. People who have a lot of money are automatically evil no matter what. But the study was created in the context of paper currency. Even Monopoly uses paper currency. And yes, there could be some reach on my part. There could definitely be some questions that need to be answered. But I'm already hedging my bets on the idea that the way that they rigged this game to begin with will automatically create a scenario where the person who's advantaged is predisposed to acting like this. And the reason that I'm here today, and the reason that I think a lot of you are probably here today, as I've mentioned a couple of times already, we're entering into a new ecosystem. We are gaining access to a form of money that is not controlled by any particular individual. And even if it does get controlled, we can easily create, reproduce, and generate new kinds of money. And these kinds of monies are referred to as cryptocurrencies. Now, you guys have some familiarity with cryptocurrency, I would assume most of you, right? Okay, so some of the primary features of cryptocurrencies, we'll go over these just briefly. And these features, they really highlight the idea that this is a particular kind of money that will generate more freedom, will provide us with more psychologically sound way to interact with as many people as possible. So one of the key principles here is cryptocurrencies are decentralized. What this means is that in the cryptocurrency ecosystem, there's no central point of failure. There's no honeypot that a person can just use to steal a whole bunch of money from at one time or control the money from a centralized location. And again, even if that is possible with some cryptocurrencies, we simply engineer a new cryptocurrency where that problem doesn't emerge and doesn't crop up. Cryptocurrencies are also peer-to-peer, which means instead of relying on a third party to handle our money, i.e. a bank, a government, or even some type of private agency, I can hold all of my money and I can send it from me to Lynn, from me to this gentleman, without any kind of barriers to obstruction, without having to deal with any kind of third party. And this next feature goes along with it. Cryptocurrencies are also borderless, meaning if I want to send money from here to someone in Japan directly in a peer-to-peer fashion, there's nothing to stop me. You guys help me break this down. What happens if I go up to the MoneyGram or the Western Union and I try to send $1 million to Japan? What happens? Yeah, fuck yeah, I'm a terrorist now, right? I have to sign all kinds of forms paperwork, the CIA, the FBI, Homeland Security, everybody knows now that I tried to send $1 million to someone in an offshore location. And they're probably going to be interested, especially if it's a lot of money. Well, guess what? You can do that same transaction on a cryptocurrency or blockchain platform in the blink of an eye without having to worry about anybody being scrupulous in that moment and figuring out what you're trying to do. Sure, somebody can come back later and look on a blockchain and see that that transaction was made, but you're not having to fill out all your personal credentials on a piece of paper so some bureaucrat can see where you tried to send that money. And this, my friends, is something that I think a lot of people forget about in the cryptocurrency space. This is a huge boon to what we're all trying to do as anarchists in our great strive toward more freedom in this world. And it's absolutely amazing. So cryptocurrency is also permissionless, which means that if you want to innovate, if you want to create some kind of upgrade for a particular piece of blockchain technology, you can do that in a way that is more wholly democratized, meaning I can change some code and then I can submit that code to be upgraded in this particular blockchain system. Now that doesn't mean it's automatically going to happen, but what that does mean is the community ultimately decides if this change is worth submitting. Now here's the big problem in the current system as it stands. So if you think there's something wrong with the fiat currency system, how are we going to upgrade that? Or are we going to beg a politician to change the way that the system functions? And that's exactly what has to happen now. And this is why there's so much red tape and so much bureaucracy in the land of financial controls. You can't go out and try to make changes to this particular ecosystem easily because of all that red tape, because they want to make sure it's highly regimented, highly controlled, and that nobody can get involved in that particular ecosystem. So in my mind, this is one of the huge reasons why cryptocurrency was created. It was created to undermine the current scenario, right? The enigmatic creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, even said in the white paper that the idea is not to have to rely on trusted third parties to manage and handle our money. Instead, we should have that opportunity. And this is why the permissionless component is so important. Now, another piece of this, which we'll get into the psychology of as well in a moment, is the feature is transparency. Cryptocurrencies are, and this has been a big piece of confusion for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is pseudonymous, which means that the transaction is recorded on a blockchain and it's publicly visible, but you don't have to apply your name and credentials to that. But here's the thing. If you're some kind of social leader and you're trying to create some type of important change in society, you can say, hey, I'm doing this, and this is the wallet, and this is the address, and this is a charitable cause, and this is where all the money's going. Currently, politicians and government are not incentivized to tell you where any of the money goes. Fuck, when we get taxed, do we know where all that money goes? I mean, we have a pretty good idea that it gets transformed into a bomb that is then shuttled over to destroy some person's home and kill a child in their bed over in the Middle East. It's certainly not going to fill up potholes, right, in the Midwest. So this right here provides leaders in society with the ability to decide where they're going to send their money, and they can show people, hey, this is going here, it's to a good cause, and I'm being completely transparent and completely honest with my goals. So cryptocurrency has the technological features to retool and reinvent the way that we think about working together in society. And naturally, because this is environmental, it allows our psychology to catch on. It creates a situation where people no longer have to worry about these issues, this nastiness with fiat currency and all the baggage that comes with it. Here's how it changes us. So the master-slave dynamic is an important component of fiat currency, right? If you live in a fiat currency system, you're supposed to be beholden to the way that our quote-unquote masters decide the money should be handled. With cryptocurrency, we create a new kind of relationship dynamic, a friendship dynamic, where we can connect with each other and work on a communitarian level and send money to each other without having to worry about the third parties, without having to worry about the centralized control, without having to worry about the surveillance state, without having to worry about the politicians, the bureaucrats, and the kleptocrats, and all the nasty people of the world to control what we do monetarily. And that's exactly why this is so important. Like, a big chunk of our life is about money. It's about communicating value, and this is what they don't want you to know. This is what I had to learn after having to take drugs, right? I had to swallow a pill of MDMA and start to peek on it and start touching myself. And then I had this flash of insight that the Zen Buddhists call Satori. And when I had this flash of insight, I said, holy shit, I've lived for 20 some odd years of my life and I've been duped this whole time and I didn't even think about it before. I just played World of Warcraft and numbed myself into oblivion. How many people are doing that kind of stuff right now? Sometimes I even get caught up in that still, because the game that we're having to deal with right now is fucking rigged, right? That's the Monopoly game. That's the Monopoly game. That's what these researchers missed when they did these studies. They're so embedded in this system that we live in that they couldn't see the forest for the trees. And I had the lack of fear to try to discern what's happening without those biases. Another important piece of this puzzle, and this will come from an anecdote, but cryptocurrency changes the way that we work and the way that we lived. Guys, before I ever started to get on a stage and speak, and I've done this particular talk several times now, and I've been into tons of cryptocurrency events and spoken on this particular topic, I worked at Walmart, and I worked at Walmart for 10 years. 10 years, and I was an assistant store manager, I was a customer service supervisor, I was a zone manager. I did every job in the book at Walmart. And listen, it was voluntary. I'm not saying that working voluntarily for even an evil corporation is bad. If you want to do it, you can do it. But here's another piece of the puzzle of why things are changing so drastically as a result of cryptocurrency. When cryptocurrency came into existence, luckily I got fired from Walmart because they saw a drug charge on my background. That turned into a boon. But then after that, I discovered cryptocurrency, and then I started learning to work on my own accord, of my own volition, and really pull myself up by the bootstraps. I realized that I didn't have to live in accordance with governmental dictates, with society the way it stands. I can be a micro-entrepreneur. I can build out contracts from home. I don't have to trade my time for money, and I don't have to worry about living on somebody else's accord. And this was a huge revelation, an insight of magnanimous proportions, right? Because now I just live on my own. I've invested into cryptocurrency. I've worked for cryptocurrency companies. I don't go into some bullshit, 9-to-5 job every single day. And this is what you call a fundamental shift of the way that we think about relationships, the way that we think about work and play, the way that we think about the state of the ecosystem. So the communists, the socialists, the people who believe that labor should be distributed, it's not even necessarily that some aspects of their philosophy is all wrong. It's just that we've moved beyond that. Because you don't have to be just a laborer. You don't have to trade your time for money. And I hope that you guys can also articulate this, because the way that things are changing, it's what Seth Godin called a linchpin. Being a linchpin means that you're an indispensable human being. And because you've cultivated your own skills, your own expertise, your own abilities, your own magnificence, you can do what you want to do, and you can live how you want to live. If this isn't psychologically novel, then I don't know what is. The next piece of the puzzle here is gamification. And this is fun because I like to get back into that Monopoly board review, that study. So in the Monopoly game, the game was rigged, right? It's not gamified in an equitable or fair way. However, if you're working in the cryptocurrency space and you like to use a cryptocurrency platform, I like to use Steemit as a representation. And Terry back here knows about Steemit, and Gina. Steemit is a platform where you can write blogs and then you get paid to write those blogs. This is what you call a gamified system using a token economic model. What that means is that you can write a post, a blog, and then the community votes on whether they like your content or not. I was an early adopter in Steemit shortly after I got fired from Walmart. And I did really well on Steemit in those early days without having to be beholden to any single person or deal with any kind of bureaucratic nightmare. And as a result of that, I was able to get into other work in the cryptocurrency community. But the big deal is it's gamified in a way that's fair, right? The reason I mentioned before, a lot of people play video games and get into these other types of escape outlets is because they're fair, right? If you go to play some video game, generally the creators of that video game try to make it fair where you can actually win. How many people feel like they can win in this particular environment that we're in, where some certain group of individuals get all the cut of the money and all the leverage and all the power out of the gate? That's changed now. Because of cryptocurrency, we can fight that without having to do anything except start using these systems. And that's exactly what I did. So token economic models change the game of how we approach society. Now, I've talked a lot about psychology, but I want to get into why I believe cryptocurrency actually does change us neurologically. So when we use cryptocurrency systems, and this actually applies to all kinds of behavior, just living, behaving, acting, thinking, engaging, being, we actively work to alter our neural connections. We grow our brain, right? This is a concept in the field that's referred to as neuroplasticity. And this has just really been fleshed out over the last 2 decades, really just the last decade. What it means is as we live and we behave, our brain rewires itself. It changes to fit that new mold. I believe when I started engaging in the cryptocurrency space, I very clearly reshaped my brain to stop thinking about living in the current system and start living in the system that we're currently building, living in the non-system of tomorrow, living in the free, equitable, and agoristic system. That is what has happened and what will continue to happen as we continue to work with these systems. We're going to plastically change our brains, and we are doing that right now, to start thinking about the way the current system works and the way the new system is working. And I am a living, breathing example of that, and I'm sure, 100% positive, there's other people that are living in the same manner. It could have been done before the invention of cryptocurrency and other technologies, but this technological revolution has really invigorated this notion, and anybody can do it. You don't have to give up. You don't have to suffer living and working in the current environment and situation that you live in. You just have to push forward, and you have to do it. This is a lot of what Sasha Daygame was talking about. It's certainly about the focus. It's about the spiritual connections, the compassionate connections with other human beings, but it's also about that internal drive to change and a recognition that you want something better for yourselves. And I just think that's so important. In the field, in psychology, they also refer to this as nature via nurture. So if your environment changes around you and you positively and proactively try to change it, that will change your brain. See, the issue here is they tried to communicate this notion that it's actually nature versus nurture, that these ideas of environment versus the way that you grew up are at odds with each other, right? But the reality is that we can change anything that we want to if we put our mind to it and we know that we want to. And that's the truth I believe in. That's the truth that I found. And at the end of the day, not to understate this whatsoever, we are in the midst of a humanitarian and financial renaissance. Because of the way that we're developing outward technology, cryptocurrency systems, and blockchain, we are putting ourselves in a situation to transcend ourselves, to become way more than we currently are. And another time that I had taken MDMA, I think it was at Anarchadelphia, one of the myriad of times that I swallowed that beautiful pill, I had this insight where I combined the thinking of two of my favorite thinkers. One is Terence McKenna. Who's heard of Terence? No. And the other one is Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil. So what I realized on this MDMA experience is these two gentlemen were saying the exact same thing, right? And their idea was that consciousness is going to expand rapidly. There's going to be a transformational period where we grow as human beings, where we evolve. We're effectively being midwived out of the teenage years of humanity and into adulthood. Terence characterized it in a pretty strange way, suggesting that there's some kind of eschaton at the end of time, or some kind of strange attractor that's pulling us toward it, so that history is an illusion and we're just moving in a certain direction. Kurzweil, more respected in traditional scientific communities, effectively said that we're going to create artificial intelligence technologies that become way smarter than us, and effectively we allow our intelligence to dot the universe as a result of the growth and expansion of these machines. So I think that we are making this transition, and that blockchain and cryptocurrency are a key facilitating factor in that particular movement. And so you know right away that I'm not in the Elon Musk camp where I think AI and technology are a bad thing, right? This is all happening in a very beautiful way that's allowing us to grow and change as a species, and it's changing us already very rapidly. And I don't like to delve into necessarily the potentially, what was the word that Sasha used? Woo-woo? Yeah, I don't like delving into the woo-fuckery, but I do think that it's very clear that we're creating a new kind of lives for ourselves. And I think that life naturally does away with the authoritarian state, with the system as it stands. And I think that we need to bring this revolution, this renaissance, to as many people as possible. And I really hope that you will all help me share these particular insights and share the love of cryptocurrency and technology in general with as many people as possible. I think that I probably have some time for some questions if anybody has questions. I'm not really sure where I'm at.
Yes. Do you see the U.S. dollar ever becoming a cryptocurrency? As it be a game changer.
Right. It's clear that governments have already looked into digitizing their currency. Russia had this notion of the crypto ruble. China has been in discussions. There's been oil-based coins in South America, and they're wanting to leverage this. But here's the thing: the gig's kind of up, because what they're creating is not actually going to be a cryptocurrency. It's going to be some centralized shitcoin that they can completely and totally control, right? Because they don't want a truly decentralized currency to exist. But I think that might be the start. And so we've already seen this with Facebook and the coin they've tried to put out called Libra, right? So people are thinking about digital assets and currencies, and when governments talk about them, people naturally get interested. But some people will be tricked into the idea that these are actual cryptocurrencies. As Andres Antonopoulos said, a Fed coin is not a cryptocurrency. Country coin is not a cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is truly decentralized and democratized, and people have accessibility to it rather than it being controlled by a minor elite. And now there's one caveat to that. There are some cryptocurrencies that have become more controlled and seem to have more of a hegemony. But the good thing is this is a voluntary opt-in space, which means that if I don't like the way that you do your cryptocurrency, if I think it's fascist or totalitarian or has some features that I dislike, even the most minute, I can go over to this other cryptocurrency and say, I like this better, and use it. 5 minutes, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I will share my experience with cryptocurrency. Maybe a year and a half ago, I purchased about 60 cryptos on Poloniex. Since then, Goldman Sachs buys Poloniex. 20% of my cryptos basically just got frozen. They're like, hey, we want to give you the warning. It's gonna, and I couldn't get them out to wallets. I bought Bitcoin when it was around 2,300, so that's up. So Bitcoin has been, the positive one, right? And then other ones are really, they fluctuate pretty rapidly. I had one that I got at 2.5 cents, went up to 99 cents, is back at 6 cents. And I'm just sharing this as an experience. My overall investment was $5,000. It was an incredible struggle to get my $5,000 through the pathway to get the Bitcoin, to get to my wallet. And I think I'm just sharing that as, like, while it was a lot of effort to do this, a lot of cryptos outside of Bitcoin itself have gone down. So I think from a stability factor, that the Bitcoin feels like it's a stable one, and there's a couple of the ones that are the Ethereums and stuff. But what's your opinion of that? I have not purchased anything with it. I think it will be great when you can buy things over. But I go on eBay and I'm buying stuff around the world, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah. You said quite a bit there. Hopefully, I can encapsulate it. I'll say that my friend Edward Kingsley over there said that competition on the market is good, for one. So there are going to be competitors to Bitcoin that are going to be potentially usable as a quote-unquote store value. I have some personal reservations toward Bitcoin and its store value characteristic, especially if it doesn't have some of the other features that I talked about earlier in the presentation that make money sound money and that add it and that provide it with value. But with that said, the markets are going to continue to fluctuate, right? This is still a brand new space, even if it's a little over a decade old. The technology is still going to change, and a lot of the altcoins and additional blockchain technologies have really not been fleshed out well. There's not really a lot of what we call killer applications in the space that you could start using right now that makes sense. There are some good applications out there, but not the best. And a lot of those altcoins, for lack of a better term, they're not, or a better phrase, they're not meant to be stores of values or investments where you're hoping to get a gain on. They're what we call utility coins, where they're used for some kind of token economic reason within those particular niche communities. So what you have to do is keep your eye out and look at the intentions of the communities and if these coins are actually investment worthy. And I would be more than happy to get into more detail with you on that later. Yeah. All right. Is that good? Okay. We can chat if you want after I have to finish taking questions. Thank you all very much.